Let's start with the question. How much corruption does each constitutional option generate? In Tropico 5, constitution options each add or subtract to your total corruption percent. This is a financial overhead that eats up a portion of your country's income. However, the game is utterly opaque about which options increase corruption and by how much. How much does each option increase corruption by? For all 12 options. So how can we solve this? There's one possible answer. Answer 1. So I performed a little science and learned the answer. There seems to be a 13% baseline corruption minimum in the modern era. It is 13%. This is the lowest corruption value attainable. Earlier phases have higher minimum corruption values. I have not gleaned this particular information yet. The highest possible corruption value is 39%. Colonial options voting rights all citizens vote. Plus 0% corruption male citizens vote. Plus 1% corruption wealthy citizens vote. Plus 2% corruption religion and state secular state. Plus 0% corruption theocracy. Plus 2% corruption atheist state. Plus 2% corruption armed forces militia. Plus 0% corruption conscription. Plus 1% corruption professional army. Plus 2% corruption world wars options political rights democracy. Plus 0% corruption police state. Plus 2% corruption totalitarian state. Plus 2% corruption labor policy work for all. Plus 0% corruption happy childhood. Plus 1% corruption workers paradise. Plus 2% corruption citizenship immigrants nation. Plus 0% corruption visa program. Plus 2% corruption guarded heaven. Plus 2% corruption Cold War options personal rights security surveillance. Plus 0% corruption total state control. Plus 2% corruption open society. Plus 2% corruption economy structure free market. Plus 0% corruption planned economy. Plus 2% corruption plutocracy. Plus 2% corruption media independence independent media. Plus 0% corruption subsidized media. Plus 2% corruption total propaganda. Plus 2% corruption modern era digital rights free internet. Plus 0% corruption fight piracy. Plus 1% corruption total firewall. Plus 3% corruption globalization open borders. Plus 0% corruption strategic sector. Plus 1% corruption protectionism. Plus 2% corruption ecology energy efficiency. Plus 2% corruption economy first. Plus 0% corruption zero emissions. Plus 3% corruption the least corrupt government. Is apparently a secular democracy where every citizen is eligible to vote defended by a militia. Work is mandated for all citizens and retirement is quite late. However, all newcomers are welcome as the immigration policy is lax. This nation practices free market principles augmented by open borders trade agreements and a priority on economic health at some expense to the environment. While it has an independent media and unrestricted Internet access, it also has systematic surveillance of its citizens, ostensibly for their safety. The two big gotchas for me were that zero emissions is the greatest source of corruption, tied for first place, technically, and that an open society is more corrupt than one with security surveillance. I hope this answer helped, and if it did, please drop a comment and subscribe.